I grew up and was 14 years old on the night Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
No one has ever seen more than a third-generation NASA image. Spent money on documents and books that I bought and sold around the country. If I could not verify it 100%, I would lose every penny I had. These are not stories I'm telling you. These are things that you can look up online right from your computer at home. Kids, I'm getting old and ready to die. Buy my books, learn how to do the research, and finish this project for me, won't you?
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Nothing Fancy. And today I'm excited to have Ed Wilson with me. He is a historian, a rare book dealer, archival researcher, and author who spent years uncovering government records, NASA photographs, intelligence memorandum, and Cold War era documents related to the early space program. Rather than relying on witness accounts or speculation, his work focuses on original source material, including thousands of archival images and declassified records. Through his books and research, Wilson explores how information moved through NASA and intelligence agencies during the space age and what those records may reveal about some of history's most debated mysteries. So thank you, Ed Wilson. How are you?
Kevin, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to it. It's about time that I brought it out. You know, circumstances sometimes require that you don't do everything in the proper order that you would want to.
Yeah.
Well, it just so happens that with the disclosure forum being held in the Senate next week, it's time for me to disclose what I've discovered, even though it's not quite complete. I still have 4 Freedom of Information Act that I've received calls from the National Reconnaissance Office and from the Geospatial Survey, the CIA, and the Space Task Group. Those 4 are on the verge of being released, but I can't wait for them. But I think you will be well pleased with what I do have now. If it were my druthers, I would wait until those packages come because they're going to be the icing on it.
So my first question is, why now?
Well, Kevin, like I said, I'm attending the disclosure forum being held in the Kennedy Caucus Room in the Russell Building of the Senate. And I intend to divulge all this information to the people there in hopes that the government will now investigate and conclude some of the things that I can't get my hands on. But I have drawn the map to where those things are, and I'm hoping we will have some very, very exciting hearings.
Do you think the government is under pressure to release everything, and that's why they've started releasing files?
Well, to be honest with you, the history of this program goes way, way far back. We have to understand that during World War II, the carnage that went on was horrifying. We hardly experienced it here in the United States, but Europe and Russia and so many places were devastated, and the bloodiness of that conflict left and scarred the people who created our government functions back then immeasurably. It was terrifying. And these men who had just got out of that conflict in World War II would do anything on earth to keep that kind of death and destruction from happening again. And what that means is the UFOs that have been caught up, and which you are about to see some original NASA images, not anything I have is from people who making claims. These are images I've retrieved from the National Archive and that I found in the original Simpkinson archive. So those images of UFOs were caught up not because they were UFOs. They were caught up in the secrecy, missile technology, being back engineered from photographs.
And how long, because you didn't start as a UFO researcher, right?
Yeah, that's good.
How did you get into all of this?
Well, and really what I've enjoyed my whole life has been reading, and there's nothing you can do reading history except maybe teach history in high school. I love kids, but I've always been a little more greedy than that. And I've also craved a little more excitement in life. There was one thing that I do better than anyone else, and that is retain the knowledge of history and historical documents and books. And those are exactly what I found my career to be most exciting. And that is I go to auctions. I read the boxes of books and documents, and I know immediately what kind of historic value they have. I bought items for as little as $1 and sold them for over $10,000. So I'm a rare book and document dealer. I buy them at auctions, and then I sell them in the best auction houses around the world. But it's not all profit. Don't misunderstand me.
Right.
The one thing that I love most, and the images you see here, they're going to be free for you to get. I don't care. I just want disclosure. My biggest thrill comes from saving history from the trash heap. Every year, documents, famous books, all these things go from an auction into a dumpster, and no one ever realizes it. And I have put item after item in museums around the world, and that's gratifying.
So what attracted you about UFO research, and what did you at what point did you say, wait, hold on, something is not right here?
Well, basically, I grew up and was 14 years old on the night that Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon. I remember standing out on the front porch of my house here in Ohio. The crickets were chirping. It was a bright moon night. It was a rare place in Ohio when there was not clouds obscuring the moon at night. The fireflies were flying all around me, and I was a 14-year-old young man, and I gazed at the moon, walking there right now.
Right.
So that was indelibly etched into the minds of every young boy when he saw that launch. Previous to that, my family was always involved in the studies of science and political affairs. We loved it. We loved history. We're a history-loving family. And I followed every single one of those launches, as did the whole country.
Yeah.
It was an amazing thing. So from that background, as an auction goer, as a guy who made his living from auctions, I would scour auctions within 150 miles, and I would pick one with a target that I knew I could make some profits on. Well, I happened to see one over here in Akron, Ohio, right by the Lewis Space Center, and it said NASA Archive for sale. And they all come with pictures, and I looked at them, and I said, my goodness gracious, these are fantastic pictures. There were 31 black 3-ring binders, 3-inch 3-ring binders, filled with item after item directly from NASA. And just because I am a historical document dealer, I knew these were some fantastic values, and they were rare. The problem that allowed me to buy them when no one else would, it was advertised as the NASA Archive of Emily Ertl, E-R-T-Y-L. If you look up Emily Ertl, you'll see that she was a secretary at NASA. But what you don't see from that general lookup is she is actually the first female employee at Cape Canaveral. And when I discovered that and saw the picture of her with the very first space capsule, which I believe I've given you a copy of that picture that you can show to these people. Kids, look at what you're seeing. What do you see? It looks like an old taxi garage from World War II. And guess what? It's not far off from that. Times was so primitive. It was taken in 1959. Basically, what happened is that back at that time period, the United States was shocked. We were stunned when the Russians launched the Sputnik, and we had nothing comparable to deal with that. And so the Space Task Group was formed so that we might play catch-up. So that's what you see in that image right there, the very first one. You see Emily Ertl, and she's nestled in the arms of a man named Scott Simpkinson. And this is actually the Simpkinson Archive, because 45 to 1996 when he died. In fact, if you look at the New York Times obituary of Scott Simpkinson, it says, and he was cared for by his longtime friend and companion. We used euphemisms back then. Scott had been married, and he had had a child, and the child was disabled. And when they took him down to the swamps of Florida to battle the cottonmouths that crawled across your apartment floor, she declined to come with him. And from that time on, he more or less had a free ride to be with Emily Ertl. So nobody knew who Emily Ertl was. Everybody knows who Scott Simpkinson was. He was the chief engineer for NASA, designed all the blockhouses from those early Mercury programs. You see him with every single one of the astronauts. The archive is filled with Christmas cards from them, and they're all mentioning Emily and say, thank you, thank Emily for me. I wish I could be there, but tell Emily I really appreciate, whatever she did, this, that, and the other. So this was not publicly known, and I didn't know it either.
Yeah.
I was surprised. So when I purchased, and I had no idea that in the back of the Gemini 11 binder, I would find this remarkable lithograph that I think you'll have a picture of. Show these people right now. Kids, that is a sanitized briefing document. It's a lithograph, not a photograph. And nobody could understand, myself included, well, why would they make a lithograph of it?
And what's the difference between the two? And is that the biggest, is that the most shocking thing that you found through those archives?
Well, my goodness gracious, yes. Look at the lithograph, kids. I'm sure he's got it on screen for you now. It is shocking. And look what it says. It says strange object. I believe it says strange object as seen during the Gemini 11 flight. Doesn't even say the Gemini 11 mission. This is CIA terminology or National Photographic Interpretive Center terminology that I learned. They even made the phraseology of whatever they were showing obscure so that you cannot trace these things easily. The lithograph is a halftone lithograph 3-dot image. The reason that the lithographs are made, MPIC specialized in making briefing boards. What you have to understand is that when you have a photograph, and that was the whole problem, these photographs could be taken, and they were so powerfully clear and accurate, a smart back engineering guy like Mick West, the famous skeptic. Mick is a genius. I love it. Kids, watch one of Mick's podcasts where he absolutely tears apart photographic images and debunks UFOs left and right. He debunked my lithograph too, kids, but the man's a genius. The problem, the reason he debunked it was because I didn't send it to him. I had published the books, and because I intended this to not be, really brought out until I had completed the entire investigation, which has taken 3 years. But someone in Germany had seen it, and they had sent it to Mick West, and he debunked it. And he says, "Oh, it's not a photograph. It's a halftone lithograph." Well, I've been selling halftone lithographs my whole life. So he got it from someone in West Germany. So he says this is a fraud. Well, and that's fair game. Yes, Mick, you were absolutely right. It's a halftone lithograph. But the man is the best argument there is for why they made these halftone lithographs, because Mick West can take a photograph just like you're seeing in the Gulf right now in the Persian Gulf War. When you see the next time they show something being blown up, a missile strike on a oil tanker in the Gulf, they will show you it's an unclassified document. And you look on the TV and look right across the top of the TV screen, and it says unclassified. Now, I want you to take a real good look at the word unclassified on this lithograph from 1966, and then look at the exact same unclassified above the missile blowing up that oil tanker. It also says right at the top, unclassified. Look closely. They have not changed the font. It's the exact same font for 70 years. It's a sanitizing job, and that's what unclassified means. It doesn't mean secret, not secret. It means we can release this because we've taken out all the information that a smart cookie like Mick West can take and get from an actual photograph. And that's why this whole thing started, was because the photographs that were coming from space were so highly detailed, and they talk about it on the Gemini 4 mission, that a smart cookie like Mick West could look at that photograph and he could devise an entire ICBM target range of information in the Soviet Union.
Do you think the photos and the videos that we see today, that they're releasing today, are sanitized?
I can guarantee you are, and that's what this book does. And if you get the book, you will see the exact top secret documents that say, and I'm going to read them to you verbatim. And you know, I know it's not really cool to read, but it won't be very long. I have 3 top secret documents that will show you exactly, in their own words, what happened and why NASA no longer.
And why are they sanitizing them? Or do they?
They're sanitizing them because the same military struggles that went on back then, the threat of nuclear war still hangs over top of us right now.
Yeah.
The human beings are always in war. Then it's the nature, it's the way that we were built. For whatever reason, good or bad, I don't try to make decisions on that. I only know that as a historian, it never changes, and it has not changed today. What you're seeing has been sanitized for release, and the reason is because there are military secrets that can be derived from something as simple as film footage. For instance, that unclassified footage that you see as you watch that oil tanker being blown up, what's missing from that is actually all the aerial data that's showing up on the flight screens of these stealth fighters and bombers and missiles. And if you had that information up there, someone in the Soviet Union or China will look at that and say, holy cow, you know what? I can calculate the exact angle of attack. I can see where they came from. I can measure exactly what the aperture is of the lenses they are using, the sensitivity of it, and what kind of film it must be. All these things, a smart photo analyst, like at the National Photographic Interpretive Center, can derive that and use that on your own weapon systems. So all this secrecy did not come an attempt to hide UFOs. The secrecy came from the military not wanting to divulge that we were actually spying with our Corona space satellite imagery. That the people you can see in these documents, a lot of them, they suggest that we will only release this to people with Beitman clearances, which is, I believe, the classification they use for the Corona program spy satellite. The Corona program, in case you don't realize it, was a spy satellite we sent up to survey all of the vast Soviet Union that we didn't even know how big it was and what it looked like back then. Kids, we were primitive. Well, we didn't have, I didn't even get to see a live European television broadcast till 1964 when the early bird satellite came along. But that Corona, we were so primitive, it couldn't even send it through radio transmission. They took the film, and the film would enter into a capsule, and the capsule would re-enter the atmosphere, and they would actually intercept the parachute that it landed on in midair. That was secret. And the reason it's secret is this. Kids, when the space age started, we had all kinds of rules and agreements to try and keep us from killing each other. In other words, we had determined already that the ocean was an open place for people to commerce and have commerce, but we had set treaties up saying if you come within 3 miles of our shoreline, then that's our water, and we reserve the right to blow you out of it should you not come with our permission. So those treaties were long set up. All century after century, we had treaties setting up what was acceptable, but we had no treaties at all for space flight. And the consequences of space flight were this. Back in 1956, before the Russians launched the R-7 first intercontinental ballistic missile, warfare with hydrogen bombs was carried out by Russia's lumbering T-34 bombers with propellers crossing the vast 11 time zones of the Soviet Union, being maybe 4 or 5 hours from the crown heads of Europe. And with a nuclear bomb, we had 4 or 5 hours. We could watch them on radar coming. We could try and stop the war from occurring. We could send fighters. That was 1956. Kids, in 1957, this changed. When the Soviet Union sent the R-7 first intercontinental ballistic missile up into space, we no longer had the luxury of hours. War and destruction had shrunk in that one missile. When that happened, and we had no response for that, and we had no treaties, every single flight that went up into space, we did not know if it would be a nuclear missile or not. We did not know if that satellite that was orbiting over Washington, D.C. could drop a nuclear bomb, and within 5 minutes, all that liquidation would happen. Every single flight was possibly on the verge of nuclear war. NSAM 157 in the book is the presidential decree saying that the film will no longer belong to NASA. So that's in the book. You can read that document. That's the start of it. And that's policy from the very top down. Yeah. All the other documents, you have to realize, I've got CIA documents. I have National Reconnaissance Office documents. I have geospatial documents. I have early documents back from the OSS before it even became the CIA. All these things interrelate, and they're all designed so that you can't find them. It's like going through the Epstein files. Yes, they released massive amounts of Epstein files. Good luck finding anything in that because it's purposely designed to be a needle in a haystack. So that's what happened. And the reason that the UFOs got caught up is because of national security and not because they were UFOs. So
it became a race to a space.
Yes,
basically.
And you can see, I think George McBundy, I think, is one of the national advisors to the president at that time, and he says exactly that not only is the Soviet Union upset about any reconnaissance from space, but our own allies, London, Paris, Belgium, all these allies of ours don't want us flying over and making recordings of their securities either.
Right.
So that was exactly why this had to be secret so long and why it took years of treaties before we now accept the fact that there's surveillance overhead every day. Back then, we had no treaties and no way of verifying treaties to say that we can tell you calmly, American citizen, that you're not 9 minutes away from extinction. We didn't have that.
Right.
Over the years, we've developed that, and now we live with it. But we live with it very uncomfortably still, because each advance that comes is still another step closer to the instant annihilation that I'm afraid is our lot in life.
Tell us what you know. What do you think happened, and what do you think about Area 51?
Well, I've looked at Area 51. Now, this is incidental. This is not the purveyance of my books. I will give you what my books are when the time comes. All strictly documents. But Area 51, what's his name? The guy at Area 51 that worked on at S4 and stuff. I'm horrible with names, kids. I already told Kevin. In fact, I'm lucky I got Kevin's name right. But Rob at Area 51, let's see, George Knapp interviewed him. I know that. It was a
Robert Doherty, Area 51 books?
No. George Knapp. Oh, gosh, see? I told you I had him.
George Knapp is a highly claimed chief. And
who did he introduce? Who did George introduce?
Lazar or Laser?
Bob Lazar. Oh, okay, yes.
Yep.
There we go. So
Bob Lazar.
Yeah, let's start right there. So anyways, it's Area 51 is not my purveyance, although I know a lot about it because I've now researched for 3 years almost every UFO file there is, trying to seek evidence for my own case. But Bob Lazar has gone through the same thing that our modern testimonials from our whistleblowers has gone through. And these are documented. And I think I read initially when I read about Bob Lazar, these smears and the sexual innuendos, which, by the way, we're human. And, you can bring up this dirt on anybody, any one of us. Mm-hmm. So those sexual innuendo smears were just like a glaring beacon to me of this is a smear campaign. We're sexual creatures. You're going to find something you can make bad appearances of somebody. But the rest of the stuff that he did, I looked into his affiliation with Edward Teller was for me one of the most convincing things. I saw that, yes, Edward Teller did know the man. And I believe that what he said now was fairly accurate. And one of the most amazing things, though, however, as it relates to my own work and my study of this lithograph, as you can see, if you look at that lithograph, kids, look at the lithograph, look at that flying saucer, notice the aura around the flying saucer, and look at Bob Lazar's, look at the UFO Bob Lazar said he worked on the sports model. Compare the detailed drawings of it. They're very similar, aren't they? And one of the other things about it, while you're looking at that lithograph, here's something I want you to think about, too. One of the first things when people saw the lithograph and were trying to help me determine whether or not it could possibly be real was look at the portholes. And I call them portholes simply because that's what everybody says, although I doubt very seriously they're windows. For me, they're more than likely they're energy diffusion instruments. You look at the tremendous amount of energy that must be going on in that kind of a craft doing those kind of phenomenal things. And then you think about how hard it is to even radiate heat away from our own space station. My God, half the space station itself is nothing but a method to radiate the heat away so the astronauts don't cook to death inside there. Space is not an easy place to radiate energy from. And I'm looking at those portholes, and I'm looking at some of the metamaterials that, we're now using nowadays. And it seems to me those portholes are probably some kind of energy diffusion system. But those are theoretical. Let's stay away from that. My books are not theoretical. You're not going to hear those spouted. You'll hear me talk about it here because I was asked about it. But the important thing is look at that lithograph, look at the portholes on it, look at this, here's what the people who saw it said. They said, well, that's childish. That's one of the worst UFO pictures I've ever seen anyone done. Guess what? That's because what you're used to seeing is a fraud and a hoax. What you see is a UFO that has perfect windows, perfectly evenly spaced, perfectly the same size, perfectly spaced. Guess what? Real life functioning instruments do not behave that way. You're looking at energy being diffused at the instant that they captured that image. And so what was originally a detraction from that UFO is now, for me, confirming evidence that we're seeing something that we didn't know about. You saw all the hoaxes show them all equally sized. They don't show them actually operating and diffusing energy at different rates. That's one of the interesting things I found. But Bob Lazar, Area 51, These are, those are outside the purveyance of.
Do you think we have UFO intelligence?
Yes. One of my favorite books, and again, this is not in my book, but the research I've done on it, when you ask about do we have UFO intelligence, I can tell you from reading one of my favorite books. I recommend you read it because he warns against artificial intelligence way back. I don't know, when did he write it? 1996, something like that. It's called The Day After Roswell by Colonel Robert Corso, who, if you look into, and I'm a historian, so I'm used to looking who this guy was. He was phenomenal. He worked for a department in the Pentagon that was called the Foreign Technology Division. Some of the work that he did that's documented is they went down to Brazil, and the Brazilians had a wonderful, beautiful machine gun that they were using, their helicopters. So they stole it, they copied it, they brought it up to Foreign Technology, and Robert Corso took that Brazilian machine gun to the various manufacturers in the United States. We copied it, and voila, the United States of America has the best machine gun ever. So that's the kind of thing they did in foreign technology. The man he worked for was a great hero, and he was a well-known general. He was a super, super engineer. Robert Corso was a great engineer, too, with a near photographic memory. And he tells the stories. The thing is, he did not write the book until the general who gave him what he said was a file cabinet full of Roswell parts. Okay. And it was his job, according to his whistleblower testimony in his book, to take those parts and have them back engineered in the various companies, as he did with the Brazilian machine gun. And they were presented not as what they were, but to be back engineered. And that was his job. But the man he worked for was a great general who I think it was on like Pork Chop Hill, one of the bloodiest battles of all time. And the general actually went to the very front line, and his men knew it, and they idolized him because he was a great leader. He was a genius of an engineer, is why they put him in that position. And Robert Corso idolized him, and he promised that he would never divulge anything about the Roswell back engineering jobs he did as long as he was alive. And he kept that word and only wrote the book after he died.
And they never found the source of where this machine gun came
No, yeah, they're from Brazil.
Yeah, but they just...
Well, the engineers, the companies that you take it to, and that's the other thing. There's a lot of stuff that's been back engineered, according to Corso, that it belongs rightfully to the United States because it's all United States property that they back engineer it from. But these big major corporations have profited immensely from it. And anywhere you have profit, you have a lawyer. And anywhere you have a lawyer, you have conflict. And anywhere you have conflict, you're going to try and not divulge the truth because you want to keep your money. So that's understandable.
And I know I'm just picking your brain,
Sure.
So I'm asking these questions.
Yeah.
What do you think about the theory of that there's aliens in the ocean?
All right. Well, and now this is theoretical, kids. So this is not from my books, okay? But it's from my own studies, and I happen to have an intense interest in science, and I try to follow the latest findings. And when you look at the UFOs, or when you look at the testimony, let's go over the testimony of Borland in the last Senate hearings, or the House of Representative hearings. They talked about the testimony of Borland, who had seen a UFO over the U.S. military base and described it as an opalescent effect over the hull of the craft. Okay, that opalescent effect, to me, speaks very clearly engineered metamaterials. And this is something I remember the day that they came out with graphene, okay? 1 degree graphene off at a 1.3 degree angle becomes a superconductor at low sensitivity. That, for me, was the first metamaterial that said, my God, we can do things just with structural materials, let alone without propulsion. Here you have almost room temperature superconductivity just by taking carbon and offsetting it by 1/143rd of a degree. That's metamaterials. And if you read what's going on with these chips that they're building, this is nanotechnology. What you're having at the atomic level normal elements superimposed one atop the other in specific orders, just like superconducting carbon, have amazing functions. And some of those include things like self-repair capability, and some of those things include energy transmission, and they include cloaking and invisibility. All these things are from recent articles that I have seen. And what Borland describes is very reminiscent of some of the technological effects that these metamaterials have. That opalescent effect is how energy is affected and transmitted not through a propulsion system, but the just hull of a advanced craft may be not structural hull like aluminum framework. The hull itself is a material that propels itself through its own. In other words, that hull that you're talking about underwater and going without any resistance and at whatever speed is not doing any form of propulsion. It's the actual construction of it that allows it to appear in this world. And here's the last thing that I want to talk about these surmisal things that are in the book. And it's a theory that I've had for years. Basically, kids, what I've always thought was amazing was we look at the world through our own lenses and we can't see much of it. Yeah. We don't understand. We can't see an infrared, but we know it's there. We use science and technology to find it. For me, the most perplexing thing that I always considered was the fact that from what we do know from astronomy and what we do know about materials is 95%, and I've heard it's as high as 97%, but 95% of the universe is not made of material like you and me. It's made of something called plasma. Now, plasma is, according to the Big Bang Theory, that's the original constituent of the universe. The universe erupted in a ball of plasma. That's what I understand modern theories to say. And it's only through stellar furnaces, which is also plasma. The sun is plasma, okay?
Right.
But there are elements conducted in the sun through the thermonuclear reaction. Hydrogen, which is in a plasma form, the plasma combines to form helium. And from the sun, that's where helium comes. And then the helium fuses in the next stage of solar evolution, and we get up all the way up into, we reach iron, and we have fusion leading to the creation of iron. Those are what you and I are made of. Mm-hmm. You and I, kids, were all made of these regular elements, but that's not what the universe is made of. Mm. The universe is made of plasma, and predominantly hydrogen plasma. So what I think is, it's funny that we look for life in the smallest component of the universe, regular matter. That's where we look for life. I knew this, and I thought, well, if I were looking for life, I'd go where the, who was it, Louis Horton or something said about robbing banks. I go there, I rob banks because that's where the money is. Mm-hmm. Well, I look for life, and I look for it in plasma because that's where the universe is. And I know it can be crude, but I've written a paper on it because sometimes humor can be used to make a point. And I described it as we are plasma poop. So if plasma is a life force and found in the fusion of the sun creating normal material, which is what we're made of, if plasma has the ability to have life, and we have studies, look it up. Look up plasma self-organization. Plasma can self-organize itself and reproduce itself. Pretty close to a definition of life.
Right.
But that's the last I want to speak about, the theoretical things. And excuse me for my crudity, but I do love the article, We're Plasma Poop. And I think everybody who understands stellar evolution will get the point of what I'm really trying to say.
And what did you bring with us today?
There's going to be two blockbuster things. Number one, the first blockbuster thing is the 4 steps we already talked about. Basically, I discovered a lithograph, an original NASA chief engineers. The lithograph determined through research with the CIA files is a CIA sanitized briefing. So that's the first step. The next step that goes along with that is that I went to the voice transcripts and learned that they had seen a UFO. Then the next step came, I knew that right at that time that they're talking about the UFO, was the exact same instant they started the D-15. I went to the National Archives, and in the National Archives, I searched and found the original D-15 experiment. I have in my possession, and you can reach it through my friend Seth Lamancusa on his website, Gemini 11 UFO, Seth Lamancusa. He has Dropboxes available. I have all 16,000 frames of that footage from the National Archives. When I spoke to Color Lab, which is one of the 3 labs that is authorized by the National Archives to reproduce the photos and the documents that they have, there are only 3 of them. Color Lab was the oldest one, and the man in charge of it was very kind to me. He said they had certain degrees of clarity that they could record it under. I told him, listen, I know you work at George Washington University. Certainly, with your photographic expertise, I can get a higher definition storage. And he said, yeah, I can do that for you. And he did. So what I have is the highest definition images. It's higher than they normally get. So you can go ahead and buy them again yourself from the National Archives. But I already have them, and I'll disseminate them to people. So what I learned was, in my first book, I learned that this image that the UFO was flying right when they started it. I learned from the 12-year secret technical debriefing, Gemini 11 technical debriefing, where the astronauts talk about starting the D-15 experiment. As they start the D-15 experiment, the guy had to hold an instrument in his hand. It was the first electronic television camera in space. The RCA camera pointed out through the back of the space module. And what happened was, as soon as they finished the artificial gravity tether experiment, which is what you will see in that photograph that the lithograph comes from, you see the tether hanging from the bottom of the Agena capsule where they had just disconnected from it. And right at that moment was when they chose to do the D-15 experiment, because it looked out through the bottom of the capsule through a flap that opened up with a mirror on it, and the camera pointed in the mirror, and that's how they made the film footage from it. It was the first television camera in space. It was an orthicon tube that rested back there, and it produced an electronic television signal, and the astronaut in charge of it, the co-pilot, he actually held that in his lap, just like you would hold a radar screen. Anyone who's ever piloted a boat through a radar, you stick your head down in the mount and you look and you see a radar screen. Yeah. And you pilot the boat by that. And that's what it was used for. It was used for tracking. It was called the night vision experiment because basically when a human being orbits in space, they orbit at about 158 miles, which is about where all of our orbits take place. It takes 90 minutes to go around the world once. In that 90-minute period of time, you're half the time in light and half the time in darkness. When you're in light, of course, you can navigate and do tracking upon such things as aircraft carriers, should you wish to track them or not. Mm-hmm. You can do that well with the human eye. But on the 45 minutes of nighttime, in that 45 minutes, it turns out the human eye does not reach full peak night vision for 20 minutes. You have to immerse your eye in total darkness for 20 minutes. So if you want to track something on the night side of the Earth and you only have 45 minutes on each orbit, guess what? 20 minutes of that, you can't do anything. So they invented the orthicon tube, and that's what this experiment was for tracking and night vision. And it worked great. That's what they said. In the debriefing, you can hear them say, it worked so good, I didn't even record everything because it was just crystal clear. It was good. What they did was this. you look at that TV tube and he's able to observe everything that he wants to see. But in his hand, while he was doing that, he had a switch and he was instructed. Anytime you see anything you don't understand, press the button on a switch. When you press the button on a switch, it activates an actual film camera. The RCA D15 film camera recorded film on 16 millimeter film, which is what I got from the National Archives, and it did it at 6 frames per second. So at 6 frames per second, there were 16,000 frames, more or less, that I got from the National Archives. And those 16,000 frames, frame number 515, which happened in the first 2 minutes of the activation, which was right after end of the artificial gravity experiment, and right where we have that S66545585 main NASA photograph, red number photograph, right there. And I think I sent you a picture of that you can look. Kids, what you're looking at is one of the actual frames from the D15 experiment. You'll see in the top it should say JPG 000515. I believe that's the one that I sent to you. And if you look at the bottom of that, what you see is every time that he hit that click to record what he was being seen, what was being recorded most of the time was nothing but a television signal, and nobody recorded it. It was just in his eye.
Yeah.
But he was told anytime there was something he didn't understand to go ahead and click the button and record it, and he did. And he only reports, and he reports it right in the technical debriefing, which I went over with you and showed you, and you can confirm for yourself. Yeah. It's in my book. All these documents are in my book. They're highlighted. It's not me telling you. These are not stories I'm telling you. These are things that you can look up online right from your computer at home. I give you exactly where to go to it, but exactly what it says is it says everything went great and there were no anomalies. So it worked so well, I didn't even record everything that you asked to because it was working so well. And there were no anomalies except for one, and it occurred during the when the D15 experiment started, and we had lost our Stack 5C battery. And that was the only anomaly he recorded. And that's what matches with the film footage from the National Archives. Plus, I think I sent you another beautiful image, too. This one is more around, I think it's like frame number 15,129, something like that. I call it the blue saucer, and you should have that available. So, kids, take a look at this. That comes from that frame 15,000 something. I call it the blue saucer. That's not the only one in there. There's all kinds of aberrations in there that I've found, other kinds of craft. You'll also see an image that I possibly sent you by Dr. Stephen Brown from Ohio State University. Did a wonderful and layout, and you'll see the actual UFO in the lithograph. And below that, I think it's frame number 15,196, shows the aberrational lights, and he matched it. We were talking about the strange lights on the porthole, how they're not equal. That's from the lithograph. But below it, Dr. Brown has laid out the image from the D15 experiment, the 16,000 frames of that. And look how well they match. So not only do you have it matching in the lithograph, not only do you have it matching the actual photograph S66545585, but you have it matching a frame from the 16,000 frames of footage. This is all in the books. It's all documents and not me saying anything. Don't believe me, kids. As an old man, let me tell you, don't believe anybody. People have self-interest. Me too. We all do, okay? But, try to strive for verification. And that's what my life has been. I had to verify everything. I spent money on all the documents and books that I bought and sold around the country. If I could not verify it 100%, I would lose every penny I had in it. Yeah. So that's where I do with all these books. Everything in these books is not from me. The stories we were talking about, Bob Lazar and all those things, those are fun, and I enjoy discussing it with you guys. And I do have opinions on them. There are no opinions in my books. There are no opinions in my books. There are no opinions in my book. There are detailed items and methods to read them for yourself. And that's what my books are about. So what you see are some of the images that I shared with Kevin, and I think those are some pretty interesting images. But that brings us up into the third and final book that I am waiting for I'm waiting for the final release of my Freedom of Information Acts that I've been notified already that we're within the last month waiting, hopefully. Mm-hmm. But here's what I determined. So those are the documents that show that CIA briefing lithograph shows the best UFO ever. And there's lots of evidence, lots more than what we went over. They're all in the books. You can read them for yourself. That's an amazing story right there. But here's the story that's also amazing. And this one is really going to grab you. Remember, NASA was started as a civilian organization. It was not supposed to be involved with the military at all. Remember, I told you about there were no treaties in space. Hence, when they started the NASA program, even though the Soviet Union was a military program, we tried to say that our space program was civilian. And because it was civilian, there was less threat and fear. So up until this year, when the government has now taken over NASA and it's now officially a military. Up until this year, everybody has always believed that NASA was a civilian institution and it was the pride of the nation. Everybody was proud of that little blue meatball with the NASA insignia. But here's what's going to change that forever. I'm going to read some things to you, just excerpts from 3 documents that are in the final book. You can read the entire document for yourself. But here's what occurred, and we'll start. This is the headline. It says this: Top Secret National Reconnaissance Office Documents. NASA film intercepted. Astronaut Gordon Cooper threatened a fistfight as images were seized, downgraded, and never returned. NASA never got the UFO images. Now, around 1960, the National Reconnaissance Office was a top secret program, just like Area 51 was. The U.S. government did not recognize the National Reconnaissance Office until 1992. So for 32 years, while I was a young man, I knew nothing about the National Reconnaissance Office. Hence, all my document searches started out initially with the CIA. Fortunately, all these files cross-reference because one agency speaks to the next agency, speaks to the next agency, and you can search in them and cross-reference until you find out what you need to know. But that's the headline. Here is the way it starts. The first document is the top secret, and it's top secret. You'll see the document. It says right at the top. You can find out where to have them. It's all in there. Top secret National Reconnaissance Office directive, dated August 9th, 1965, from Brockway McMillan. He's the first director. Confirming intelligence authority over space-based imagery. This is 1965. The second document I'll read from is documentation of film interception at the aircraft carrier recovery stage, and angry astronaut Gordon Cooper threatens a fist fight. And the final document, and this is the one that I've been searching for 3 years, and finally I have found the document that puts Scott Simpkinson, who has the actual UFO lithograph, it puts him right in the line of this secret film interception. A direct internal response from Scott Simpkinson, NACA's original Space Task Group chief engineer and one of NASA's founding engineers, questioning why mission film was withheld. Okay, kids. There. Those are the 3 documents. Let's start away with the Brockway McMillan Memorandum. Okay. It's a 3-page top-secret memorandum dated August 9th, 1965, from the National Reconnaissance Office Director Brockway McMillan. It states explicitly, in regard to photography, and these are quotes, and I'm reading them because I am not going to give you a paraphrase. Quote, All Gemini-acquired photography, both NASA and Department of Defense sponsored, is processed at the Manned Spacecraft Center Photographic Laboratory in Houston. McMillan then continues, I question whether either of these delegations is appropriate for matters of potential national and international concern. He further writes, in the Washington area, the National Photographic Interpretive Center has a unique capability for both quality processing and interpretation of aerial photos. I believe it would be to our mutual benefit to transfer responsibility for processing, orientation, and interpretation of future Gemini or similar series photographs from the Mission Control Center to the National Photographic Interpretive Center. The film interception recommendation comes next, and it's the most striking of McMillan's recommendations concerning the handling of exposed film immediately after recovery. Quote, since you will probably wish to avoid any arrangement which infers the involvement of NASA in a classified endeavor, I recommend that procedures for high-speed delivery of exposed Department of Defense and NASA film from the aircraft carrier to MPIC be arranged in a manner which will preclude contact with or reference to either the National Reconnaissance Office or the National Photographic Interpretive Center by NASA personnel or Department of Defense personnel on duty with NASA who are not properly cleared for National Reconnaissance Program access. National Reconnaissance Program access. 1964, top secret, Beitman clearance only. The highest clearance you can have. And that's showing you right there, NASA personnel were not to know. Now, that's why they can testify and stand in front of Congress and say we don't have them. Now, McMillan then proposes a specific mechanism for obtaining the film. Quotes, and this is the quote that you will need to think for the next one. As a suggestion, it may be feasible for Colonel Sweet of your security staff to arrange pickup and delivery of the film. I would make arrangements for release of Department of Defense material to him or his representative on the carrier. These quotations come directly from McMillan's letter to Dr. Robert C. Siemens, Jr. at NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C. Now, pay specific attention. In this memo, he says only Department of Defense film, but we'll see what happens to that later and what is still going on today because they never quit this program. We go next to Gordon Cooper's response. Gordon Cooper, commander of the Gemini 5 craft. And the documentary chain continues in a memorandum dated September 4th, 1965. Following a review meeting, the memorandum records, quote, following the review, Gordon Cooper mentioned to me that he had called Dr. Siemens earlier in the week to express his concern about the handling of NASA film. He stated that he was damned unhappy with arrangements, and had he known that Colonel Sweet was picking up all the film, he would have had a fist fight on his hands aboard the carrier because he damn sure wouldn't have taken the NASA film. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a great little American hero, isn't it? I love these little Texan guys. Number one, they're cute and good looking. I've always been jealous of cute, good looking fellas. The other one is for someone who's probably barely 5'4", he's got all the vigor necessary to stand up to anyone who gets in his way. Truly an American hero. Truly a man who stood out, and he did what he thought his duty was. Even though he was in Air Force, this is how he finished. The memoranda continues. He stated further that this was supposed to be a national program and should be handled in that fashion. He stated that he was speaking as a NASA man. He indicated that they would not hear the end of this. Ladies and gentlemen, this document right here confirms the Brockway-McMillan document. It confirms it in the most dramatic way possible. I can't help but admire Gordon Cooper. Reminds me kind of Captain Kirk from Star Trek, which from my generation was wonderful. Not only was it a wonderful comparison there, but Captain Kirk had his own engineer, just like Gordon Cooper did. And it's funny, his engineer was Scotty, and when you look at all the archives that I have in the Scott Simpkinson archive, every astronaut refers to him as Scotty. Every engineer calls him Scotty, too. So Gordon Cooper, to me, represents Captain Kirk standing up and saying, I'm a Starfleet officer. Only he says, I'm a NASA man. Kind of humorous how sometimes art and history coincide, isn't it?
Right.
So that's dramatic. And now finally, this is the document that I've looked for 3 years. Scott Simpkinson's response. The custody chain documentation does not stop there. A memorandum dated September 3rd records a meeting involving Scott Simpkinson. And again, these are quotes. This is not me, kids. You can read them yourself. Colonel McKee received a call indicating that Mr. Simpkinson was quite upset after having learned that all the film was not turned over to Mr. Gammon the night before. The memorandum continues. Colonel McKee asked Mr. Simpkinson in to meet with him and me. This gent was quite upset. Quieting his concern took quite some doing. The significance of this entry is that Simpkinson was directly involved in NASA's photographic handling chain and was upset after learning that all the film had not been transferred through the expected channel.
Right.
That's, ladies and gentlemen, the best I can do as far as showing you that the reason NASA can make those testimonial statements is because they lost control in 1965 of their film. It was sent to the National Interpretive Center right from the aircraft carrier. National Interpretive Center, I have the 1957 and 1958 documents showing the lithographs that they purchased in that office, where it was located in Washington, D.C., how it was the first skiff that ever was utilized, the briefing boards that they made, the lithographs that they made, who they were developed for, how many times they were developed. The average number of a large lot would have been 25 people ever would see a lithograph like that. With the Simpkinson lithograph, probably even less than that, with the Beitman clearances necessary to see that kind of information. And then this is the other thing that you need to hear. When you go to the astronaut photography and intelligence community who saw one, I researched a book and several articles by a guy named David James. This information is all there. It's from the Journal of Space Policy. The publisher is also here in the year 2006. Its volume issue is volume 22, issue 3, pages 185 through 196. DOIA Space Policy, and it has the numbers there. This research was published by David James in 2006. It documents instances involving photographs associated with Egyptian and Syrian military installations that were reportedly not returned through NASA channels. Those two photographs right there were Gemini 11 photographs that were never returned. So they do not exist in the official NASA archives. So anyone wanting to know whether NASA is the end result, they stand up and they swear, we don't have any. They're not lying. They've been left hang out to dry by the military and the people in higher ranking who necessarily are just trying to protect us from extinction. And then in October 1965, the director of Central Intelligence directed that all subsequent Gemini photography be reviewed by the intelligence agencies before public release. And we've already seen that did occur. Although it is not known how many images in total were withheld or possibly released in degraded form, sanitized briefing documents, degraded form. At least several were not disseminated because they disclosed Egyptian surface-to-air missile sites and Israeli airfields Admiral Rayborn informed Webb of NASA that he had established a screening procedure in October 1965. We just read those in another trove. And then withheld or possibly released in degraded form. And this is what's great. That's also in the 72 pages of National Reconnaissance Office documents I have. Documents are shown to be arrived at the National Photographic Interpretation Center in 1965 that were NASA film, not just the Department of Defense film, but the actual NASA film, which included the two that they never got back here, right? And the documents show that they actually measured the resolution of each of the photographs. Brockway McMillan states, we find that anything with a resolution of higher of 60 feet or less is a threat to national security. They use an instance where one of the Gemini photographs over the Edwards Air Force Base showed a 20-foot beam, okay? That 20-foot beam is well below the 60-foot resolution that they consider a national threat. In other words, the images, if you disclose them at that resolution, can be used militarily against us. And then it states that the MPIC tested some of the synoptic terrain photography from NASA and found that it was 40 feet, okay? And some of the Department of Defense film was 10 feet resolution. This is in the documents. You can read them for yourself. I have them in the book. And what it states next is what they do when they got that film in to the National Photographic Interpretive Center, what they returned to NASA was called product. And what a product is, not the original negative. What they returned were called interpositives. And interpositives are a negative made from a negative. And depending upon how long you hold the development, you can control the resolution of that item, okay? And they say right in the documents, the interpositives were tested before return to NASA, and the resolution was no more than 100 feet. And this pretty much is an amazing document. Now let me explain some corroboration on that, and then we'll let you answer ask some questions. This comes from the Johnson Space Center Oral Histories, when Scott Simpkinson died in 1996 as NASA's chief engineer. Ever since the creation of the Space Task Group, all of a sudden the personnel at NASA realized that the generation who built the program, the original giants upon whose shoulders we stood, were dying, and they had never recorded their testimony about the creation of the program.
Yeah.
So consequently, you can go to Johnson Space Center Oral Histories and ask for Richard Underwood. Richard Underwood started out as a CB during the war. CBs, of course, are construction battalion engineers, right? My God, he was offloading boxes of ammunition onto the beaches as they were being bombed and shelled. A terrifying, terrifying prospect. These horrific wars, how you survive, you have to attribute to a higher power, in my opinion.
Right.
But that's where he started, and then he went and got his degrees when he came back on the GI Bill. He was involved with the National Mapping Service. At the time, airplanes were the best way to map places. A lot of the world was undisclosed. My God, kids, we didn't even know what the world looked like. We could barely fly an airplane around the world, let alone know what all the jungles were in between.
Right.
So that's what he started out doing. But as he started there, you find that the National Photographic Interpretive Center and almost every back engineering military outfit in the world goes exactly to those kinds of people. Those people who were mapping for civilian purposes all the natural resources that could be found through aerial photography, they were a treasure trove of the McWests of our world. the guys who knew so much about photography and had practiced it at such high altitude for so long that they could tell you exactly what you were looking at, even though you couldn't tell it yourself by looking at it. So that's where Underwood started. And in his oral history, if you go to page 2 of the oral history, you want to know how serious this issue is. This is in NASA's own files. I told you how to get to it, page 2. And I'm going to paraphrase this one because that's enough reading. But you can go for yourself, and I'll give you the direct quotes right here as best as I can remember. Page 2. Richard Underwood was working down in Honduras, and while he was down in Honduras, he met a Honduran girl, and he married her. He had been working with the CIA on the U-2 spy planes, and he also flew reconnaissance photographic missions on B-29 bombers. Okay? Now, when he met that girl from Honduras and married her, a general called him into his office. This is in, kids, read it for yourself, page 2. The general called him into his office and said, quote, "I should have you shot right now without a trial as a traitor to this country for marrying that woman," unquote. Page 2. Richard Underwood, NASA chief photographic technician. "I should have you shot without a trial. A traitor to your country for marrying that woman." So when you hear these things about people's lives being threatened, and you asked earlier about Bob Lazar and his threats, I know for a fact that when Leslie Kean was getting ready to release to the New York Times a story about David Grush, when David Grush was coming forward, they knew that he was coming forward, and he was receiving death threats. And because he was receiving death threats, Leslie Kean did not wait to present it to the New York Times. Because he was actually receiving death threats, she went to, what was it, the debrief, which everyone knows is the space debriefing. They would publish it immediately. And so in order that there might be some safety for his life, she went to the debrief. Okay? You may not know that story, but I'm fortunate enough to know that. So when you want to know a little bit about these death threats, read it for yourself on page 2 of Richard Underwood's life story. He also tells you wonderful things in there, too. It's a 42-page, as I recall, 42-page total interview that happened with him in the year 2000 before he retired. Wonderful things like this. So suppose and the Congress needs to know, well, he says right in there, this is also in there, and it's in the book, no one has ever seen more than a third-generation NASA image. Images can be degraded. We've shown you where they are degraded. Brockway McMillan measures them. They're degraded and released to 100 feet. That's the second generation. What happened to them at NASA after that, I don't know, but I know they only released those images to the National Geographic Society. They didn't want people looking at that. But the public release, Richard Underwood's own testimony, no one has seen more than a third-generation NASA photo. Not a first generation, not a second generation, but a third. Now, this is what else he says, too. So suppose a member of Congress says, well, I want to see the original photo, and they bring him the photo. And this is corroborated through Dean's research, too. NASA film, the first generation original NASA film, and you can find it in Richard Underwood's direct testimony, is the thickness of saran wrap. Hence, Gordon Cooper, when they tore into his film, they ended up tearing and ruining, and you'll see that in the memo, because the MPIC had no idea they were using a nylon-based film because the acetates deteriorated so badly in space. So if a congressman thinks he's looking at an original photo negative, guess what? Is it the thickness of saran wrap? That comes from Richard Underwood's testimony, too. And he talks about how images can be degraded simply by the amount of development time used on them. So this book has dozens of references, CIA references, National Reconnaissance references, all of these things going all the way up to NSAM, I think it's 153, George McBundy saying, this stuff is a threat to us. We can't let it out. Project Galaxy, where even the knowledge of these secrets are secret themselves. So there's your compartmentalization going wild. That's what I've tried to document. So kids, it's been fun talking about the things that, my theories are and stuff like that, but that's not what my books are. You have 3 series of books. Each one presents all the way from an 80-page scientific analysis showing that the paper is consistent with the 19th century lithographic processes of the time, to the actual transcripts of the astronauts in space seeing a UFO fly over top of their heads, where it kills the battery, and then there's a 6-minute voice omission there through the debriefing documents where they say we saw no anomalies except for one, and it was right when the battery failed. And then clear into the second book where I learned that the D-15 film actually existed in the National Archives, and I retrieved all 16,000 of those frames, which are available. I have them. I paid for them. You're welcome to see them. Look at my books. You'll find my books on Amazon.com. Just simply go to Google and put Simpkinson NASA briefing document. That'll usually bring up Amazon. They had some trouble because I have such an unusual name, Ed Wilson. Because of that, they confused the authorship of all 3 of my books. So you have to go down to the bottom of the thing and click other books by the author. I got it straightened out that I'm not the Ed Wilson who was the MIT professor or whatever. Jesus, there's so many guys named Ed Wilson. It's like a Jose Jimenez or something like that, So that's why I say go to that. Just put Simpkinson NASA briefing document or CIA or UFO. If you put the UFO Simpkinson briefing document, it might take you to the first book. Oh, by the way, these books are super expensive. Not all of them. The last one's cheap. It's under $40, okay? The second one's a little more expensive, but that's because I had so many wonderful, wonderful color photographs. And the first one is very expensive. But the reason is this. It is probably, according to Richard Haynes, who contributed a whole report, he did an excellent 40-page report that he allowed me to reproduce in the rear of the book, because it is probably going to be, according to Richard Haynes, the best archival photographic documentation of the earliest NASA space program. 150 photos, many once secret, from the guy who built that program. And they're 9x11. They're beautiful. They're majestic. I'm very proud to have saved them in the book form. So it's a combination table book. And then on top of that, there's 150 newspaper articles that Emily Ertl compiled for them as the secretary. Kids, we didn't have the internet back then. I had to use a slide rule, okay? You guys don't understand how primitive we were when we started this stuff. The reason that they had her record all the newspaper articles, and they're in there with fantastic stories about the early astronauts and what transpired in their lives, was because we didn't have internet. We didn't have access. We couldn't even instantaneously reach Europe unless it was through a cable and telegraph, right? Mm-hmm. So it was very primitive back then. So today, where you can get on CNN and you'll be intruded a million times with people cutting into your life to say, hey, look, newsflash. Mm-hmm. Back then, the only thing they had was the newspapers.
Yeah.
And if you've ever watched an old movie, which you know I love old movies, right? This old historian sits there and I point at all the items and say, I've got that, I've got that, I've got that, I've got that. Well, because I love old movies, I may know this, but you might recognize it too. They'll show an old movie and they'll see a guy in his black and white city streets running around, and there is a newsboy. And he's waving the newspaper in the air and he's saying, extra, extra, read all about it. Kids, you know what an extra is? An extra is a text that gets right to you right at the instant you do. Some of the extras are included in the documents in the newspaper articles that are to be found in that first book. And it's done like this. Actually, an extra was a second printing of a newspaper when the story was released over the wire service. Okay. So John Glenn's original flight was only 3 orbits. That's 270 minutes. And you'll see John Glenn completes orbit 1 satisfactorily. And then there's an extra edition from the same newspaper, orbit 2 completed. That's the only way we were able to communicate. We were so primitive back then. But of course, they did the same thing with newspapers on the Lincoln assassination. Some of the famous Lincoln newspapers that I've discovered were like telegraphed to second editions, were printed out, about who killed Lincoln and stuff. And it was all done through newspapers. It was a slower world. It was a world where bombers bringing a hydrogen bomb over your head took 5 hours to get there.
Right.
That was the world we lived in.
Now, you mentioned that you were going to that you're going to go to Washington, D.C.
Yes. Next week I've made reservations to get to attend. I had to sit back here, kids, because I'm old, okay? So have mercy on an old man and his memory. But I just discovered 10 days ago that they were having the Disclosure Summit in the Russell Senate office building in the Kennedy Suite. I believe it's on the 3rd floor, and it will take place on June 25th. And when I discovered that, I registered for it immediately and said, I've got one chance to get out here and present this evidence. Whether I will be able to present this evidence to everyone that I hope to, I don't know. But you can certainly ask your congressmen if they're aware of it. I've just spent the last 10 days printing up all kinds of documents and archivals and news media reliefs. I will be taking them there. If you see this before that happens, I'll be staying at the Royal Sonata Hotel or Sonesta Hotel in Washington, D.C. within walking distance of the Senate office building. I'd love to see you. Come get a copy of my books. Come get copies of the actual documents that I've printed up here so that we can get them before the House caucus or the House.
What's your prediction in the next 10 years in the UFO space?
Well, for one thing, I've learned long ago that you don't buy lottery tickets, and you certainly don't listen to me when you come to predictions. I couldn't have predicted what I discovered would be so phenomenally world-changing for my own personal views. Mm-hmm. So you say, how many years do you want to look ahead?
5 or 10. With everything
5 or 10 years?
Yep.
If you look at what's going on in the Disclosure Summit in particular that's coming up here, there are factions that have to fight, and what will be released, I don't know. But one thing I can tell you, this briefing document I have definitely comes from a photograph, and that photograph is on saran wrap thick film, and unless you think they destroyed that film that was kept in freezers in Building 8 for years and years, then there's a way to find that UFO photo right now. So that's all I'm trying to get you to see. This, with the evidence I have, can be traced. And I have right now a Freedom of Information Act that I wrote up after I discovered the CIA document from 1969 detailing the National Photographic Interpretive Center's handbook, which is their rule book for disguising facts. I discovered that. I wrote FOIA, and it should. They have wrote back to me that should be done within a month. So as things would have it, I wouldn't have disclosed this information without that. But I can't wait. Kids, I'm getting old and ready to die. Buy my books, learn how to do the research, and finish this project for me, won't you? I want to go lay down and play guitar for a while on the beach.
What is a question nobody's asking that they should?
What is a question that nobody's asking that they should? Well, the most important question that anyone can ask is, am I capable of accepting the truth? Should it be that we have definitive proof that there's life elsewhere? Am I capable of continuing my life in a profitable manner? It's all about you. It's all about your beliefs. Some people are flat earthers. Some people believe that the moon launch was fake. The moon launch was faked.
What's your opinion on the moon launch?
Well, no, man. And here's what my opinion is. My opinion is that every human being sometimes accepts things that they need to accept for themselves. I would never judge anyone because you have to make your own life decisions. Mm-hmm. For me, I would say if you believe it was faked, go as I did down to NASA. Stop and look and walk along the immense 365-foot long Saturn V rocket on display. Look at how small you are in one of the 5 main cylinders. And then, if you're lucky enough, go see a missile launch. Go see Elon Musk behemoth supercargo rocket. Feel in your chest the power of the immense engines, and then ask yourself, is all the expense of these things that I can actually experience really indicative that there was a fake moon launch? Is it really indicative that the earth is flat? But if it is, that's okay. Everyone needs to know for themselves something. And I am as gullible as every other human being. So what you need to believe for yourself is okay. I won't tell you not to. But for me, it has absurdities that I can't accept. But that's for me, not for you.
Do you think we're dealing with extraterrestrials, interdimensional beings, time travelers, or something else?
Okay, we're going to go into a segment of theory right here. This has nothing to do with my books, but as far as I can tell you right now, I do study science. I do try to do the best papers I can, and then trying to understand the modernness of physics. I try to study mathematics. Right now, for me, the main argument is has to do with we don't even agree on all the tenets of mathematics. Is infinity finite or is it not finite? And that has a lot to do with how you conduct your mathematics.
Right.
And I mean, you can have infinity, and we have so many anomalies that don't work. The galaxy rotates at such a speed that if Einstein's theories of relativity are consistent, and if they're true, then they would fly apart. They would not be able to change that far. So what is wrong? It says something is wrong. So what do? We invent dark matter. We invent dark energy. These are cheap forms of cheating math, okay? So the math is great. I'm not arguing against that. I'm not saying it's not valid, but I'm saying it's not the final picture. If you have to change something to get the right answer, then the formula is wrong, is what I believe. What I see now happening is we're having emergent systems come about, emergent gravity. And what is really going on in mathematics is you take the topology and de Sitter space and things like that. Those things have algebraic expressions that are showing me that what's really emerging is, and like Einstein said what? Everything happens at once, we just don't realize it. And that's another way to me of saying that there's no difference. Spooky action at a distance. If I poke my finger onto this object here and it moves over here, if that's what's happening, and that's what quantum physics is saying, then I say they're the same thing. If I poke it and it moves here, and then it also moves over here, guess what? Distance is not what's right. So it's not space-time. Space-time emerges from relationships. Space emerges from relationships. So Einstein's interpretation is space-time and mass are related through space-time.
Yeah.
And what I'm seeing with some of the studies in mathematics and emergence, that you have relationships present the illusion of space and space-time. So we're not actually in the universe we think we are. Pretty fun, huh? Wrote a couple papers, Medium. You can check it out.
Before we wrap up, I have we do a fun thing called rapid fire questions.
Oh, cool! This will be fun. I love game shows. I used to be good at Jeopardy, but I'm so old now. I don't know anyone who's a star.
These are short answer questions.
Sure.
Have aliens visited Earth?
Yes.
Area 51, hiding something or overhyped?
Definitely hiding something. Military secrets. My God, protects us from being killed.
What's one UFO myth people need to stop believing?
That wearing an aluminum foil hat will protect you.
Is the government protecting secrets or protecting us?
Double-edged sword. They're protecting us. That's how it all started. But then it gets corrupted, just like everything, through money. So they're protecting corporate interests too. So, but the end result is they're there to protect us.
If you could interview one CIA official from history, who would it be?
One CIA official. Actually, I got a chance to meet one back when I was in college. He gave a lecture. Coleman, I think it was Coleman. Anyways, one CIA official I would want to interview. Well, I don't know. I don't know if there would be a CIA official I would want to interview. I would love to speak with Brockway McMillan of the National Reconnaissance Office. That's where the secrets reside. That's where you'll find them in my book. When you read his memos, there are 72 pages. Not in my book, I didn't put this in. But when you read his memos, you'll see the NRO was in charge.
The moon landing footage, is it complete or incomplete?
This is interesting. In the recent purge, the very first purge from the Department of War, the tranche of evidence that was released, there was a very interesting one in the first tranche. Now we're on the third one as of today, but in the first tranche, on page 16 of the releases, 2 down from the bottom, is an article that says Apollo 17. It's one single photograph, okay? It's a photograph from the surface of the moon on the Apollo 17 missions, shows the mountains in the background, and there and elevated above the mountains are 3 illuminated dots that are the representation of a UFO on the actual Apollo 17 film number that you can get from Arizona State University and see it for yourself. Now, the interesting thing for me is they only show that one photograph. I know for a fact because I have the original 17-page photo analysis of that. There's another frame in there that shows a second UFO in it. And not only that, but when it comes to the pertinence to my book, where I tell you that what's released is not high-grade film images, I know that the original issue was from the NASA released photos. And if you go to that page 16, second from the top, Article 7, or Apollo 17, on the left-hand side, where they give the text explaining what the image represents, it says something to this nature, and I can't directly quote it, but it says this: we now believe that this image depicts a real physical object. First thing, that Apollo photo, page 16, Apollo 17 photo, 3-dot UFO, they say right there on the left, in the little box, we now believe it depicts a real physical object, not a lens flare, not some aberration of camera, but a real object. And then here's the important part that I think is fascinating when you consider everything I told you about my book today. It also says we are now reevaluating it using the original film. Confirms what I'm telling you. Nobody has seen more than a third generation. The report itself is showing you a UFO in degraded film, and they admit right there, we believe it's real, so now we're going to analyze the original film.
Right.
I love that. That was great. That just happened to come out.
Now, last question, and you might have already answered this one, but what is one book everyone should read if they want to find out more?
I would definitely recommend reading Corso's The Day After Roswell. The time that it was written, there are some very prescient things the man said, especially regarding artificial intelligence and some of the fears he had in 1990 about artificial intelligence.
Ed, thank you very much for your time.
Kevin, it's been a pleasure.
Can you show us your books, book 1, 2,
Sure,
3,
sure.
so people
I'm going to move this microphone away.
Go ahead and move it. Yep.
Yeah, there we go. There you go, kids. This is book 1, 657 pages. Wonderful photographs. Look at these photographs, kids. Look at the, let me just get one photograph. Oh, well, documents. There you go, kids. This is what's in there. These are actual documents. I highlighted them. That's what's secret for 12 years. You hear them discussing right there. It confirms they took a picture of an anomaly during the 2C stack failure. These are the actual documents. That's what's in the book. And then you want to see secret stuff? There you go. Scott Simpkinson. Those are 9x11 secret instruments, okay? Those were secret because basically what we were looking at was an ICBM that we were using for intercontinental ballistic missiles, and he's deploying the components there. Look at these guys. Look at the fun that they're having. They're working in old garages and stuff. Look at this miniature rocket they're testing. Beautiful, beautiful photographs. But as I said, the real treasure is the document. And then in the back, oh, there you go. That's a wonderful image. The 80-page scientific report, 657 pages. Look on the backs. You don't have to buy it, kids. I know you can't afford it. I can't even afford gas home from here. I'm going to make our camera girl give me a ride. So basically, that's the first book. Then with the next book, this is the one. This one is the RCA V15 16,000 frame camera footage analysis. What you see on the cover here is, I believe, around D00515. And look at this in the bottom of the camera. Every time he clicked that to take a picture, it had to go to the previous frame to impose on the film. This image should be in this frame before it. It is not. That's studied in the book. And go to it and look on the back cover, kids. I put these as many images as I could of UFOs on. Look at that. That's S66545884. The preceding frame, that's in your actual NASA web. Go to the Arizona State University, March to the Moon. Right there, you can blow that image up yourself and see it. I had to color enhance because I was using some analytical techniques with it. It looks, oh my God, it's a domed object. You can see it for yourself right there. Look at this. This is the D15 footage right here. There's the blue saucer. I sent you that one, Kevin.
Yep.
Look at this one. This is a comparison by Dr. Stephen Brown. Look how the light pattern matches from the D15 experiment right with the lithograph. Wow, guys, all these things are, circumstantial evidence, okay? But I put these on the covers so you don't have to buy it. You need to see, you need to analyze, you need to take over.
And then the last one?
The final one, these are the documents. This is where you will find Brock Mayley McMillan saying we are going to take away your right to know. And he does. And right on the cover, the important one, that's the photo. That's 66545585. That's the secret mission report, page 4. An overlap, and right down here, this tiny nondescript corner is the Simpkinson lithograph with the flying saucer, and the clouds match exactly. Not close, not approximately. They match exactly. Let your eyes be the judge. Don't listen to me, don't trust me. Check my documents. Documentation is footnoted. But kids, that's what I've discovered, and that's what I hope you find well worth investigating for yourself.
Well, thank you very much, Ed Wilson. You guys can go on Amazon and find his book, and we'll catch you on the next one.